Good morning, guys. It is a beautiful day to take you guys along with me on a tour of my collection of roses. For those of you that are new to our channel, I'm Tracy and this is Just to Get Farms. My husband Gene and I purchased our dream land 7 years ago and we've been living here for 5 years. It was a complete blank canvas, so we've been able to create beautiful gardens and spaces that is really starting to come into fruition. And one of the things that I am super passionate about is old garden antique roses. And today I want to give you a tour of my collection of roses that I have been working on since we've moved here. Now I still have a lot more roses that I want to purchase, but I'm just adding them to spaces as we create them. Now, not all of my roses are antiques. Some of them are earth kind roses. Some of them are just super hardy roses that have the characteristics of antique roses, so they're included in my garden. All of the roses that I've chosen for my garden are hardier roses, tough roses that are easier to take care of. And if they're not actually antique roses, they have the characteristics of antique roses. So what exactly is considered an antique rose? Antique, heirloom, or old garden roses is a class of roses that actually existed before the first modern rose was introduced in 1867. So there is a lot of wonderful old roses that are like 1890, 1915, that maybe would not be considered really as an antique rose, but it definitely has the characteristics of an antique rose, and it is definitely an old garden rose. And these are the ones that I've chosen for my garden. The characteristics of an antique, old garden, or heirloom rose is basically most of them are as tall as they are wide. A lot of your modern roses have like that V shaped where they're more narrow at the bottom and they just kind of come up in a V shape. But the characteristic of an antique rose is usually they're as tall as they are wide. Another characteristic, which is one of the most important ones to me, is that they are more disease resistant. Now, I do live in the South and we have a lot of heat and humidity, intense heat and humidity. And roses just don't like that. I don't care how old they are, they do not like our humidity. But the great thing about the characteristics of an antique rose is that it is disease resistant. That doesn't mean that it won't get disease or black spot or powdery mildew or any of those issues, but it means that it can tolerate it, it can withstand it. It'll just flush off those diseased leaves and it'll put on new growth without killing the rose or without stopping it from blooming. So therefore, you don't have to like continually spray the roses with fungicide and insecticide constantly as you do a lot of your modern roses. And of course, a very important characteristic of an antique rose is fragrance. Now there's a lot of different classes of roses as well. There's China teas, there's hybrid perpetuals, there's bourbons, there's polyanthas, there's noisettes. There's all different kinds of classes of roses, and the class is just a description of that rose. Now, I have not been able to add every class of rose to my garden yet. I still have a long way to go to get all the roses in my collection that I desire. But as I go through the garden and through my rose tours, I'll try to tell you the class of each rose and give you a little description of that class. This incredible rose on my chicken coop is called Farmer's Dream. And it has the perfect name because it is dreamy. Look how beautiful it is. It is gorgeous. Farmer's Dream is the climbing version of Belindas Dream. Belindas Dream is a shrub rose and Farmer's Dream is a climber. It can climb about 12 to 14, 15 feet tall. This is just one rose here on my little arbor going into the chicken coop. There's one there coming up and across. And then I've got this one right here that started. I really don't need it though. I may move it and put it somewhere else because it may overwhelm my little arbor here. Farmer's Dream is just a beautiful climbing rose, and it's fragrant. I mean, look how big and double and full it is. And it makes a great cut rose, because see these long stems that it makes? So it makes a wonderful cut rose. Farmer's Dream is a spring bloomer, so it just makes a big, beautiful, impactful show in the spring, whereas Belinda's Dream, the shrub form of this, is a repeat bloomer, so it'll bloom spring, summer, and fall. But Farmer's Dream is just a spring bloomer, but the show is magnificent. Farmer's Dream and Belinda's Dream both have been chosen and selected as earth kind roses. They're more of a modern rose. They're not really classified as an antique rose, but they have the characteristics of an antique rose, so they're really disease resistant, and they're a lot more hardy than just your typical modern roses. I mean, that rose bloom is perfect, a perfect rose bloom. So what is an earth kind rose? Some horticulturalists at Texas A&M University conducted a program and a study where they basically took a whole bunch of different roses and just put them out in this field and pretty much abandoned them. So they planted them in different soil types, like sandy soil, clay soil, all different kinds of soil types, and they basically neglected them. Not very much fertilizer, not very much pest management or disease control or anything like that was done to these roses, and they were just left out in the different climates like drought, heat, cold. So they endured a lot of different elements and neglect. And the roses that come out of that harsh treatment that performed well received the label as an earth kind rose. So basically an earth kind rose has a lot of the characteristics of an antique or old garden rose, and I have a lot of earth kind roses in my garden. This beautiful rose adorning my garden gate is Clatilleds Repair. It is a polyantha rose, and it dates back to 1890. It has beautiful little cabbage blossoms that's very, very fragrant. Repeat bloomer, and it comes in a climbing form and a shrub form. So you can see on this side of my gate is the climbing form, and on this side of my gate is the shrub form. And the shrub stays very small. It's only like 2 to 3 feet tall. When I got these roses, I thought I was getting 2 climbing forms to go on each side of my gate here, but one of them ended up being a shrub form, but that's okay. I'm gonna go back and get another climber and put on this side as well, but I'm also gonna leave that little shrub right there. My friend Lacey that I work with at Petals from the Past gave me these 2 roses as a gift, and I love them. Every time I walk through the gates, I think of my sweet friend Lacey. My rose climbing on my arch trellis here is finally blooming. Y'all have heard me talk about Rosa Multiflora Carnea multiple times, and she is blooming finally, and it is so beautiful, and the fragrance is just amazing. You can smell her all over the garden. You can smell the rose. It is wonderful. Now, Rosa Multiflora Carnea was brought over to Europe from China in 1804. So this rose dates back to 1804. And it was quickly spread across England because it was such a favorite. And it was actually found in the Empress Josephine in her garden at Malmaison. So it has a rich history. Now it's only a spring bloomer, so it's only going to give this show in the spring, but this is still so worth having in the garden because it is just such a magnificent show and the fragrance is just amazing. When this arch trellis gets completely covered, it's going to be magnificent. I wish you guys could smell this rose. I really do. It is so heavenly. This is Peggy Martin climbing on my storage building where we park our golf cart. And she is beautiful. Small pink cluster blooms. She blooms spring, summer, and fall, so it's a repeat bloomer. She's heat tolerant and drought tolerant and can withstand some pretty cold temperatures. Peggy Martin has a tenacious will to survive. She survived being under salt water for 2 weeks during Hurricane Katrina. Super tough rose. Vigorous climber. One of my very first videos I did on Peggy Martin Rose. Y'all go check that video out to hear the history and the story of this rose and how it survived Hurricane Katrina. This rose is a very vigorous climber, probably like 20, maybe even 25 feet. And I've been pruning her very heavily just to try to keep her more maintained and just to climb along my structure better. But she is beautiful and definitely a must-have for the garden. On my garden shed here, I've chosen Lamarck rose to climb up this trellis and go up and over this little awning that we've made is the plan. I chose Lamarck because I wanted to keep the color scheme of my garden shed here very simple and a monochromatic color scheme where it's mostly just whites and greens and pale yellows. And that's the color of Lamarck. Lamarck was named for General Lamarck, and it dates back to 1830. Like I said, it is a beautiful white, creamy white with a little tint of lemony yellow to it. It's so pretty, so fragrant. Double, full, medium bloom, very fragrant, very beautiful. This is actually a cross between Blush Noisette and Yellow Park's China Tea Rose. So it has that tea rose scent to it. And it's very sweet, a very sweet climber. It will get anywhere from 12 to about 15 feet tall. So I think it's really gonna be pretty climbing over, arching over my garden shed. My beautiful Lamarck rose that I have growing on my garden shed here is a Noisette rose. Now, Noisette was one of the first class of roses to have its origin in the United States. John Chapney produced the first Noisette rose by crossing the musk rose and old blush rose. Here again, we have old blush as a cross. Old blush is just an awesome old rose. I cannot wait for it to bloom so I can show it to you. But the first noisette was crossed between the musk rose and the old blush rose, and it has this very wonderful musk fragrance to the noisette roses. The noisette class of roses is usually characterized by strong, healthy growth, a musky scent, and usually repeat blooming cluster blooms. This is Crystal Fairy Rose, and Crystal Fairy is a sport of the old-fashioned antique rose, the fairy rose, which is pink blooms. And this one is Crystal Fairy, which is the white blooms. But it's a really great landscape shrub rose because it's kind of compact shaped. And it is about 2.5 to 3 feet tall and about 3 feet wide spread on it. It has these beautiful clusters of white blooms, a little light fragrance to it, not a heavy fragrance, just a little light scent. It's really, really pretty. It's a profuse bloomer. It just keeps on blooming, and it gets a lot of bloom. So this little shrub is about to just be covered in blooms. And it's pretty tough. It's a very, very tough, hardy rose. It does tend to get a little bit of black spot in my garden, but it's not anything bad or uncontrollable or make the rose look bad or anything like that. And that's the wonderful thing about these old hardy roses, is they're just resistant to that. They may get it, but they flush it off quickly, and they keep blooming, and they keep putting on new growth and new foliage. So it's not anything like your modern roses that's going to just wipe out the rose and kill it. I have Crystal Fairy planted all along my border here by the house in my little cottage garden border here. I love to use it at the base of tall evergreens like these emerald green arborvitaes here. I love them against that dark green evergreen foliage, and then these beautiful little Crystal Fairy roses at the base of it, because they do stay small and compact. And in this layer I have the arborvitae, and then the boxwoods that's going to make a wall around this fountain, and then the Crystal Fairies paired with the catmint. So I love this combination. I love this little Crystal Fairy rose, and I like to use this kind of rose in like mass plantings, like groupings. Instead of just one, I like to use it in 3s or 5s or 7s and just make a mass impact with it. I mean, see how pretty that is with the 3 roses versus if you just have one sitting there. It just makes so much more of an impact. And the beauty of this rose too is it's going to just keep on blooming. It'll give us this wonderful spring show. It'll bloom some in the summer, and it'll bloom again in the fall. Crystal Fairy is in the polyantha class of roses, and polyantha roses are typically small clusters, compact roses that spread or ramble. That's usually what a polyantha is classed as. As we move on down the cottage garden border here, this is Lamarn rose. Lamarn is another polyantha class rose. It was introduced in 1915. It has the small pink and white cluster blooms. It's a repeat bloomer, spring, summer, and fall. And this rose will get up to about probably right around 4 feet tall and probably that wide. So again, it has that compact shape. The foliage on this rose is very cool too. It has like a glossy leaf, and the contrast with the pink roses is just really pretty. Lamarn is not really a fragrant rose. It really doesn't have much fragrance at all, but it does have few thorns. Like, the thorns are not bad at all, and it is a great compact shrub or landscape rose. Lamarn was also chosen as one of the earth kind roses. As we move on around, we come up on one of my favorites, if I have to choose, is Quietness. I love this rose. Quietness rose is one of my favorites for many reasons. First of all, the name Quietness just brings peace to me, and the fragrance of this rose is heavenly. It's going to be probably in maturity about 4 to 5 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide. So Quietness has been in my garden. I think this is the 3rd year, and it was a small little 1 gallon size when I planted it. Quietness is also a repeat bloomer, so she will repeat in spring, summer, and fall. We'll get a beautiful little show of these gorgeous roses. I love the soft pale pink and the double fullness of each bloom. Quietness is a Griffith Buck rose. He was a professor and a horticulturalist, and he hybridized and created a bunch of different roses, and this is one that he created. It is very, very hardy. It's hardy from extreme cold temperatures to extreme heat temperatures. So it was bred for that. So it's a super tough rose. The beautiful thing about this rose really is the history and the story behind the rose. So Griffith Buck, when he passed away, a lot of his roses did not have names. They were just numbers. So his family passed on the different roses to rose growers and nursery owners, and just passed on the roses to them. Well, Quietness made her way into the hands of a rose grower and nursery owner, Pat Henry. And one morning after the 9/11 tragic event, Pat was taking a walk in her garden, and she looked down and saw this rose blooming for the first time. And she decided to name it Quietness in memory of all the people that lost their lives that day, and in memory of Griffith Buck, because he was a very quiet, humble man. So this is a very special rose. But I think you can see now why she is one of my favorites. Even though it does tend to get black spot a good bit, you can see it on here. It's okay. It's one of those tough, hardy roses, and it just flushes it off and puts on new growth. Moving on past Quietness rose, we come to the fairy rose. Fairy was introduced in 1932 by Anne Bittenall from England, and she was one of the few female rose hybridizers in the world. Fairy is in the polyantha class of roses because of its small cluster blooms and its compact shape. Fairy will get probably around 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. And it is beautiful. It's a repeat bloomer, spring, summer, fall. Not very much fragrance, maybe a little bit of a light fragrance, but the blooms and the show on this rose is just magnificent. It is covered in buds, little tiny cluster buds all over this beautiful rose shrub, and it's getting ready to just burst open with bloom. So the crystal fairy was created from this fairy rose. Fairy rose is another great landscape shrub rose as well, and this one I like to use just like the crystal fairy and use it in like mass plantings. So right here I have 3 of them, just kind of creating like a little circle here. Moving past my little grouping of fairy roses here, we come to another great polyantha rose. This is Verdun, and it is just so showy and pops in my garden here. All of these massive clusters of beautiful, vibrant pink blooms. It just really, really pops against this silvery velvet foliage of the lamb's ear. It's just beautiful. It's so, so pretty here. And then for the backdrop is those limelight hydrangeas back there. And the foliage on those limelight hydrangeas also is kind of limey. So it's just really a beautiful combination. And then my tree that I have in the center is a Yoshino cherry tree. So it's going to be really pretty against the bark of that too. Verdun was bred in 1918 in France by the name of someone that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. And it was introduced in 1922 in Australia. It is a glorious rose. I love it. And it only gets about 2 feet high. So this is about as tall as it's going to get. But it's going to spread about 3 feet. So I'm hoping they're going to all come together and make a little mass planting here. But it is so, so beautiful. And the cool thing about this rose too is it looks beautiful like this in the summertime too. So it's gonna bloom spring, summer, and fall. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous rose. And you can see the honeybees. Let's see, can you see them? Yeah. The honeybees love them because they have that little open center to them. So a lot of pollinators love this rose too. Opposite side of our house and cottage garden is the Potager garden. So alongside of the walkway here is my herb, rose, and perennial border. And the first rose that we come up on is Marchessa Bucella. Marchessa Bucella dates to 1842. This is an old, old rose. It's a hybrid perpetual rose. And it has, I mean, I can smell it like right now. It just has a beautiful fragrance. But it's such a pretty rose. I just planted this, I think it was just last year. And it's already doing great. Let me get in here where you can really see how beautiful the bloom is on this rose. Is that not gorgeous? It's so double full. Look at the layers of petals on this rose. It's just beautiful. This rose is going to get about 4 to 5 feet tall and probably about that wide. It's a repeat bloomer, so spring, summer, and fall. And this rose is just a constant bloomer at the nursery. It's one of the reasons why I chose Marchessa Bucella. That and just the beautiful bloom, the fragrance, and the name. I loved the name and I thought it was just fitting for the Potager garden. I have this beautiful rose surrounded by Spanish lavender, catmint, and garden sage. That is just such a beautiful, sweet combination. This is Maggie rose. It is a beautiful, fragrant bourbon rose found by Dr. Welch on his farm in Louisiana. It's so, so pretty. Maggie is really, really fragrant too. This is another one of the roses that just really pop and show out in the garden. It's one of the first roses that you notice coming around the corner there. It's so pretty. At maturity, Maggie will probably be around 5 or 6 feet tall and wide. So she's gonna be a really big, beautiful rose. It's so, so showy. Repeat bloomer. Spring and fall is going to be a really beautiful show, and then summer she'll give us a few blooms here and there. So the bourbon class rose is actually, it's a result of a natural cross between the old blush rose and autumn damask rose. And I actually have both of those in my garden. So hopefully we can take a look at those two on my next tour because they weren't blooming yet. Bourbon roses have a very distinct fragrance to me, and they're very high in fragrance. They smell wonderful. Bourbon rose blossoms usually have like a cupped or a quartered style blossom to the rose. And bourbon roses are usually repeat bloomers. This little sweet rose is Souvenir de la Mame. Look how beautiful that is. Look at the center of her. So pretty. It's a bourbon rose. It's only gonna get about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. It stays small, and all the energy goes into producing these beautiful flowers. I just planted this rose maybe about a month and a half ago, so it's not very full and developed yet, but I had to share it because this bloom is just incredible. Very fragrant too, has a wonderful fragrance. And look at this cute little rain gauge I got at Petals from the Past. Isn't that cute? My little turquoise bird. Souvenir de la Malmaison was created in 1843. Dates back a long way by a rose breeder named Jean Belindas. I'm probably not saying that right, who named this rose after Chateau de Malmaison, and that is where the Empress Josephine, who was the wife of Napoleon I, had a magnificent rose garden. She's a beautiful repeat bloomer too. I'm really excited about adding her to my collection in the garden. Those of you that have been following us for very long know that I work at Petals from the Past in Jemison, Alabama, which is a plant nursery and farm. Jason and Shelly Powell both graduated from Texas A&M University in horticulture and landscape design. They are a wealth of knowledge. Jason started the nursery 25 years ago, and it all started with antique roses. Jason did his internship with Dr. William C. Welch and fell in love with antique roses. So he started Petals from the Past with the intention of just growing and selling antique roses. Well, that turned into old-fashioned perennials, vegetables, and on and on and on. And his father, Dr. Arlie Powell, and his mother, Gwen Powell, Dr. Arlie was the fruit specialist and professor at Auburn University. And when he retired, he joined Jason and Shelly at the nursery and brought the fruit and the farm aspect to the nursery. So I started working at Petals from the Past 12 years ago, and mostly just to gain more plant knowledge. I have my degree in landscape design. I have a degree in interior design as well. But I received my degree in landscape design and started my own design business. But I just felt I did not have the knowledge that I needed, the plant knowledge. So I went to work from Petals from the Past, and that was one of the best things that I ever did. I learned so much just working with such wonderful, amazing, knowledgeable people. This past January, I actually quit working at Petals from the Past. I'm still on payroll, and I still go in occasionally, but I'm really not full-time or part-time employed there anymore. I made the decision, a very, very hard decision, to leave work and come to our farm full-time. So it's very exciting. I'm super excited to be able to be on my farm every day and to be working towards our dream and our goals. I was very sad to leave, and it was a very hard decision to make because they are my family, and all the customers and the friendships that I've made, I miss seeing them all every day. but I am super excited to be on this journey of reaching our farm goals and dreams that we have here at Just Dig It Farms. But I said all that to say this. If you want to add any of these beautiful roses to your collection, you can get them at Petals from the Past. If you are local or if you're driving through Alabama, Petals from the Past is definitely a place that you want to stop and visit. It is not just a trip to a nursery, it is an experience, a beautiful experience. So if you have the opportunity, please go by there. If you don't and you want to order one of these roses, Petals from the Past ships. So you can go to www.petalsfromthepast.com, and there's an online store there where you can see all of the beautiful roses and you can order whatever you would like. If you're new to our channel, thank you so much for joining me on this rose tour, and I would love for you to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell so that you'll be notified whenever I put out a new video. This channel is all about gardening and farming and inspiration and beauty and plants and plant knowledge and growing food and growing beautiful animals and family. And I would love for you to join us on our journey. If you have been with us for the past 2 years that we've been doing YouTube, I love you guys. I really do. I love all the comments. I love the community that we've developed here. I appreciate you all very much. If you enjoyed this video today, please give us a thumbs up. YouTube likes that. And if you have not, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Y'all have a beautiful, wonderful day. God bless you.